Every club. Every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome back to the Daily Palace podcast brought to you by the Global Sports Podcast Network. I'm your host today, Alex Waite, and I'm joined by a fellow enthusiastic Eagle in Dan Tanner. How are you doing, Dan?
I'm doing all right so far. End of the week, we've got football coming up, so let's see if we can't get a decent result against the Fulham, and then we go from there, because we've got an international break, so we don't want to be going into that with another loss. Thank you very much.
Good stuff. So today we're going to be giving some final thoughts on the upcoming Fulham game, which kicks off at 3 o'clock at Selhurst Park on Saturday, as Palace hope to continue an upturn in form. We're also going to be looking at some quotes from Oliver Glazner in the pre-match press conference about players stepping up and hopefully bringing their A game on Saturday. And we're also going to look back at Goal of the Month for October. That has been announced recently, and we're going to be giving our own highlights of what has been a fairly improved month, I would say, for Crystal Palace on the whole this season. So, Palace welcome Fulham, high-flying Fulham, I should say. They're in the top half of the table to Selhurst on Saturday. We currently sit 17th, just 2 points above the relegation zone, but we have picked up some good results recently, unbeaten in 3. So hopefully that will continue on Saturday. Fulham are looking quite good. They had a big comeback on Monday against fellow West Londoners Brentford. Harry Wilson bagging 2 injury time goals, which, I'm sure had the cottagers on the edge of their seats at Craven Cottage. So good result for them. So it looks like Fulham might be a little bit dangerous given their fairly positive start to the season. However, we have drawn 3 games in a row against Fulham, which usually when these runs start, they struggle to end, especially against what you consider mid-table Premier League sides. So just looking at how things are at the moment, Dan, would you take a draw from Saturday's game, or do you want to see a much more positive performance from Palace? How do you feel about this one?
I would definitely be wanting to go out there with a win. We've gotten some decent form now, especially from the Spurs game. So we've all sort of like galvanised the team. As you mentioned earlier, we are unbeaten in 3. I know it's 3 games, but for us, that's tiny victories. They can go a long way. We started to score again. I know we haven't got exactly our centre forwards, and our injury list is growing by the day. It's almost like they're just made of glass at the moment. So don't breathe heavily around Selhurst Park if anybody's around there at the moment. But you've got to be going for the win. If you're not going out for the win, then kind of what's the point in playing? You want to be going for the win. And there are very, very few circumstances when you go, I don't think we're going to do it, like when we're playing like the top 6 or something like that, or if we're ever playing in like a group stage competition and the points is already there, and it's like, okay, cool, we have no real worries here or there. But that also being said, a draw is not the worst in the world. It's still getting points, but we've only just started getting the wins, and through like the end of August and September, we had what would probably be considered relegation form at them. We were struggling to we weren't like getting blown out or anything, but we were losing crucial games that towards the end of the season could actually mean something. And we had what I think most of the fans out there would have considered a relatively positive sort of schedule. We only had 2 of the big clubs, and we managed to get 2 points off of them, but we lost to the ones we should be beating. So it's still we haven't quite forgotten that bit yet, but we now have this galvanised team that we're now winning. They have this self-belief now. It's not just, we've gone 1-0 down and we're just going to hang our heads and just be completely complacent. It's, let's try and get back into the game, guys. Come on. So we want the win, but a draw is not the end of the world. Also kind of our December isn't looking brilliant. After the international break, we've got Villa, Brighton, City, and I can't remember. I think it's Arsenal just before Christmas. So if we can get 3 points before that, I would be greatly appreciated.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. When you look at the fixture list, games like Fulham at home are ones where you would target as a club in terms of you need to try and take maximum points from it. And considering our 7-game winless start to the season, we need points when we need maximum points, as many as we can get. So going into the November internationals with 10 points potentially on the board looks a lot better than 8 points. You're in double figures. You've got something to use to build on. And momentum is massive at the moment. I mean, we've beaten Tottenham, who look in very good form. We've beaten Aston Villa, who were in good form until we went there and beat them in the cup. And we've held a quite dangerous Wolves side, although they're bottom. They are a good team. And we needed to not lose that game as well. So I would agree. I do want to see us continue that positive form on Saturday. I think it will definitely be a tough fixture. Fulham have a lot of great players and a lot of good attacking players, but I do feel confident that we can limit them at least. And I think having the home advantage at Selhurst does play in our favour. I think we saw that against Spurs. We were very positive, a lot of good pressing, a lot of good tackles going in. Just sort of got the crowd up, really, which I'd love to see again on Saturday. And I think with a few positive results, the crowd will be up for it. So just before we head into an ad break, I'd just like to ask you, Dan, for your score prediction and any final thoughts you might have on the game.
I've been kind of contemplating this most of the afternoon, sort of like going backwards and forwards. Trying to think. I would want a 2-1 win, because I think we can score now. We're not just reliant on Mateta scoring. We've got Gahey's got a couple of goals now. Chalobah's got a couple of goals and things like that. We've got other people that can score, but our defence is still fairly inconsistent. We do give up some fairly silly goals, sort of some very, very silly little mistakes. Our positioning is all over the place. Zonal marking, we have had plenty of players where could have had first half hat tricks. So and also the Fulham are quite deadly now. They're not the Fulham that was coached by Scott Parker, where it was just an open door policy that you can just sort of walk through them, and it's sort of an easy 3 points for most of the Premiership. These are sort of some decent players with sort of players that have come down from the top six. So you've got Smith Rowe is going to be deadly. He had a bit of a bad sort of time at Arsenal, especially when Arteta kind of came in. He kind of got pushed to the side. I don't know if can't remember if it was injuries or anything, but it was also a little bit of the Arsenal transfer policy of buying in top quality midfield players in his position. So he was kind of forced out. But he's a deadly player. They've got sort of Adam Traore as well, who's always interesting to sort of play against. Those sort of legs like tree trunks are built like a. He's built he's one of those guys that you're going to bounce off of him. So it's going to be a tough one. It's always going to be tough when it's Palace. We always make life difficult for ourselves, but I really expect a 2-1 victory, just to sort of keep up the momentum that we've been having going into the international break.
Yeah, I'd be extremely happy with a 2-1 win as well. My score prediction was a 1-0 for Palace. I think just with the injuries we've got, it might be a bit more cagey than we hope. But yeah, just a win. Any win would do for us at this stage. We just need the points.
We'll take 1-0. We don't mind. We'll take 3-0, 1-0. Just get the 3 points. That's all that matters at the moment.
Yeah, I haven't seen a 5-4 game in a while, so a 5-4 win for Palace, I'd even take that. Conceding 4 and winning is quite a rare thing, so something like that would be good. Right, so we're going to take a quick ad break now, and stay with us. After the break, we'll be discussing some of Glasner's thoughts from his press conference earlier. Here at Global Sports Podcast Network, we spent a lot of time selecting our delivery platform. Zencastr came out the clear winner. With 4K video recording from your phone and AI editing that automatically removes all those ums and ahs, it's super easy to start a podcast that sounds great and is delivered efficiently. If you're ready to tell your story, check out the link in the show description to learn more about Zencastr. Hello and welcome back to the Daily Palace podcast, brought to you by the Global Sports Podcast Network. I'm Alex Waite and I'm joined by Dan Tanner. And we're now going to just look at some things Oliver Glazner said earlier. Obviously, Palace are nursing this injury crisis, which the guys spoke about yesterday on yesterday's pod, which you can check out on Spotify and wherever else you get your podcasts. A few key players are obviously out in terms of, we've got Eddie Nketiah, Eberichi Eze, Adam Wharton, Lerma and Will Hughes are all out, unavailable this weekend. So we're a bit thin on the ground in terms of key players. However, when Glasner was asked about this in his press conference, he called for the players coming in to step up and put in a performance on Saturday and to perhaps try and force their way into the first team while these guys are out recovering from their respective injuries. So Dan, just on Glasner calling out some of these players to step up, who do you think he's talking about there, and which players would you like to see kind of improve on Saturday?
Well, I'm probably would have thought he's trying to call out sort of like players like Sarr and maybe sort of Kamada a little bit. They are still the kind of the new players. Kamada's been a little bit more of more regular starter. He's now got his first goal, so in the League Cup the other day. So he's probably going to be on form. I'm going to need him to be sort of stepping up a little bit more. And Sarr, because now we are very, very thin on the ice when it comes to attacking players, besides from putting out Schlopp as a centre forward again, which was one of our suggestions yesterday. We'll just put him out there as well. He knows where the goal is. But Sarr was kind of brought in to be that part of that rotation in the attacking force. So he's probably going to be required to be a little bit more proactive and sort of get a few more shots off, and he's going to be the target man for a while, because I don't know how long Eze's out for, and so many of the other ones that seem to be either coming back from injury or have gotten very silly little injuries over the last couple of days. But you've also got the players that are already there that are in the first team. So I think players like Henderson is probably another one that he'll probably wants to kind of keep on this good form that he's been on now that he's been fighting for essentially an England number one spot. With a new England gaffer coming in the new year, he'll want to make sure that he stays on form. When, like with a team, when you've got a strong, confident goalie in the back, you feel unbeatable. So it's one of those sort of, you kind of want him to do well. But yeah, those are the ones that I would probably be the one he's thinking about, as well as many of the other ones. You got still one or two that are on the injury list as well. So, and maybe you could even be talking about some of the reserve players that he might be thinking about putting on to sort of make a name for yourself, guys. This is your opportunity. Go for it.
Yeah, I sort of agree with you with Sarr. I think he missed a few chances against Wolves and left me tearing my hair out a couple of times just for his lack of finishing. And I thought he would have buried a couple of those chances, to be honest. It's not like he's just come into the team and is bedding himself in. Like you said, he's been a fairly regular starter. So he should be taking chances like that. And I hope if he gets one or two on Saturday, he does take them, because this is his chance to do that. I think, with Kamada as well, he's really stepped up the last couple of games. Has been a lot better. Kind of the player that we knew we were getting rather than the one that we hoped we were getting. He's really put in a couple of good shifts in his last game and a half or so, which has really helped. And I think it's kind of just a message to the rest of the team as well to keep the levels high. That back three of Lacroix, Gehi and Chalobah have been really good the last few games. They made a couple of mistakes against Wolves, but on the whole, they've been very solid. I think just keeping that confidence high and just keeping the levels up, I think, is what Glasner is trying to get at here by asking people to step up. It would be interesting as well, like you say, for these couple of the youngsters who are named week in, week out on the bench to maybe get 15 to 10 minutes at the end. But obviously that will depend on how the game's going, because if it's a cagey 0-0, you're probably not going to put on your 19 and 20-year-olds for their first debut in Premier League football. It's going to be if we're maybe 2-0 up and need to see the game out. Do you expect any big changes for this game, Dan? Anywhere across the pitch, or do you think it will be business as usual, but just filling in those injuries? What do you reckon?
I'm very much for probably business as usual. We don't have the greatest depth when it comes to sort of the player base, as we sort of bring up. Like on the bench, there are on multiple occasions there have been reserve players that are just essentially filling out the bench. We've had a lot of injuries that have gone back pretty much from the very beginning. We're still one or two that just haven't played or played very briefly and got injured. We've got a couple of long-term ones that are going to be out for a while. I think Decore's only just started coming back, I think, in the last week or so, but even he'll probably be coming on probably at a half-time or the 50-odd minute mark, just to keep his sort of fitness up and just to get back into sort of up to speed a bit. But as he's a sort of more defensive player, it's not going to be up front. But it's the attacking one is going to be where we're going to have the biggest changes. As well, we are down, as I've literally just mentioned, we are down to the bare bones when it comes to attacking options. So it's going to be all hands on deck, really. The defence, as you said earlier, I expect them to do really well. Lacroix and Gehi and that are doing really well. They got 2 goals between them last time out, so we can at least get something out of them. So it's very much sort of sticking as a unit and trying to get through this slightly rough patch when it comes to injuries. So, and as they've been doing since the Spurs game, is sort of the team has now got galvanised together, and they are sort of fighting for the badge, for the club. So let's just try and keep it going. I can't really see any massive changes coming through. I think it was even maybe Joe Ward or something like that was touted of filling in a spot somewhere. I don't know how much you can put on that, but yeah, it's business as usual. I think that's the way it's going to be for the time being until this injury bug has gone through, and maybe even until January when we can get maybe a few reinforcements through some loan deals or some cheeky bargains somewhere.
Yeah, it'll be especially the defensive line, that 3 and the 2 wing backs in Mitchell and Munoz. That's where your core needs to be and needs to stay. So that's vital, really, for us to do well. There was a sense, watching Glasner earlier in his press conference, a sense of like we're determined to do well, but we also can't wait for the international break to come soon enough, because we need these players to come back and help us. We are bare bones, and it's going to take quite a monumental effort to get over the line on Saturday. But like you said, the guys look like they're determined to do well. A lot of passion in the team and a lot of grit that they've shown in the last few games, and that'll do us well. But yeah, the international break will be handy for us to nurse some of these guys back to fitness. We're going to just take another short break, and then we'll be back in the final part to have a look back on some key moments in October for Crystal Palace. This podcast is part of the Global Sports Podcast Network, the only network bringing you exclusive daily news and views on your Premier League team, the Premier League, women's football and fantasy football. A unique listening experience that puts fans first, bringing you the very latest breaking news from your team. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and make us your first listen every day. Global Sports Podcast Network, every club, every day. Welcome back to the Daily Palace podcast. I'm your host today, Alex Waite, and I'm joined by Dan Tanner. And we're just going to look at now in our final section some key moments from October. So Daichi Kamada's goal against Aston Villa, the winner that sent us into the quarterfinals at Villa Park, was named October Goal of the Month. It was quite a small pool of goals to choose from. We didn't score too many in October, which had me chuckling this afternoon. The only other contenders were Mateta's goal against Spurs, sort of a close range finish that he fired in, and the other goal we scored at Aston Villa, which was Eze's header to open the scoring. So they were the only other contenders, which I was laughing at, because we obviously need to score more goals and have a few more options for November, hopefully, which I think we already do, because we've scored 2 at Wolves already, which is good. So looking back on November, Dan, as a Crystal Palace fan, are there any moments that are your highlights that stand out for you, that leave you either tearing your hair out or smiling with joy at being a Palace fan?
Well, it's being a Palace fan, we're always going to tear our hair out a little bit. It is a team that is going to frustrate you to no end. So they never don't do anything the normal way. We like to make life difficult for ourselves. We like to give our opponents a false sense of security, and then we give them a full sense of security. So it's always going to be fun where Palace is involved. But the moment I think that stands out for me mainly is the first win of the season against Spurs. We got the monkey off our back. We did it in the classic Palace way of just grind it out, make life difficult for the opposition as much as possible, and hope and pray and hope that they don't come back at us. And this is a Spurs team that not playing particularly well for their standards. They should be playing a lot better and being a little bit more dominant than they actually are. So it was nice to sort of get the goal, get the win, and it was the longest extra time I've been looking at my phone ever, just constantly like, oh, it's 5 minutes, it's 7, hang on, they're still going, having to check backwards and forwards how long this extra time is. So that was fun for me. But it's, as I've mentioned many times in the last 20 minutes or so, that after that it galvanised the squad. It gave them self-belief. They didn't fall back into old habits of just sort of their heads go down or they start getting complacent. They actually started to play as a team. And since then, we've gone undefeated. We've carried on into the League Cup, which is probably the furthest we've gone in quite a while. Probably since, I think, the likes of Zaha and Darren Ambrose, I think, was the last time we got past the first round, let alone getting into the third round. And now we've got Arsenal in the next round, which is going to be interesting, especially depending if they actually start bucking their ideas up a bit. They started hitting their usual mid-season form, but they did it a little bit early this year. So look out, City and Liverpool, I think, are going to be interesting the back end of the season, but that's a different point entirely. So that's kind of been our October of getting the first win under the belt, starting to actually believe in the team. We kind of ignore the Forest game. We'll block that one out. That one didn't happen. So that's been our October, really.
Yes, it's quite amazing, really. I like that you mentioned the Forest game there at the end, because, to be honest, I'd forgotten about that, because
we definitely
how
tried
things
to
have
forget about
changed
that.
since that. It's just like, how within 3 weeks things can just shift, and I think that Spurs result was obviously the starting point of it all. But when as soon as Mateta scored that goal, there was like this, oh, thank God, like we're back, and seeing out that game was huge. Like you said, there were some crosses going in the final stages that had everyone a bit wincing a bit and hiding behind their hands. Like the final moments of that game were massive to see out, and since then we have looked a lot better, a lot more positive, and it has been a good end to the month for us, really, on the whole. We can't really complain about the performances massively over the last few games. Like, there are a few things we need to improve on, a few mistakes that we need to cut out, but I think every team in the Premier League can mention those as well. My particular highlight actually came during the Spurs game in October. It was actually Mateta when the Celeste were chanting something unkind towards the referee with some foul language used as well. And Mateta was there just behind the referee, riling up the fans, giving it some and joining in, which that was my particular highlight. Just can't knock him at the moment, Mateta. Everyone else is getting injured, going down left, right and centre, and he's still there carrying the team and trying to get the goals and just being a menace, really. And it's something that I love to see, and that he's become well known for at Palace. So having him back doing these things is fantastic. He's a good showman, and he's good to have at the club for sure. So in November, Dan, what are you hoping for this time in a month or so? What are you hoping for from Palace?
Still probably very much carry on as we're doing at the moment. There's not much I want out of them. I'm not expecting them to go for a title run or anything. It's to keep going, try and get any kind of result we can. We've got two of the top six coming up in the next 6 weeks or so. If we can get something out of them, at the moment, I think we've got 2 points out of the 3 games we played against the top 6. So we drew against City and we drew against United, and we drew against Chelsea at Stamford Bridge, which is a great result, especially with as a screamer of a goal. I know we lost to Liverpool, but it was only 1-0, and we beat Spurs, who is definitely a top 6 contender. So we do have a decent record against them. So if we can keep going with that and trying to get points off of them, we've got the Derby game coming up fairly soon. So we got Brighton the first meeting this season we got Villa first, and then Brighton. So as I've said, it's very much to keep going, just try and get the wins, get the points where we can, and take them off everybody else as the rest of the league is trying to do. And then try and get somewhere where we're in a comfortable spot for Christmas, the December area, and then try and see what we can do in the January transfer window. So it's very much try and keep chugging along, guys.
There's plenty to be positive about at the moment, so hopefully we can keep that going. And it is interesting, like, although this run of fixtures after the internationals looks a bit menacing on paper, they are the kind of games where we do just somehow seem to flourish and pull something out of the bag. So although there's a bit of worry looking at it, I think we have things to be positive about going into there. So hopefully by Christmas we'll be pushing up the mid-table and maybe overtake our opponents on Saturday and be above Fulham. That would be a massive goal to achieve. But we'll see how we get on. Right, everyone, that's been the Daily Palace podcast for today. Thank you all for listening. And you can find us wherever you get your podcasts. And if you could give us 5 stars, that would be amazing and help us to get found. I'd like to thank my co-host today, Dan Tanner. Thanks for joining me, mate.
No worries. As always, it is always a pleasure being here. I get to talk Palace with some great people. So let's keep this going.
Appreciate that, mate. I don't always get called a great person, so and neither do the other guys, I'm sure. So it's a nice compliment to end the week on for all of us. So let's hope for a Palace victory on Saturday, and we will catch you again next week.
Every club, every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.